back in the saddle again, here to feed the YouTube meat grinder that is underpaid and overworked content creators. Since I last made a video, the world decided to engage in the fresh-hot sequel to The Black Plague, and the Final Fantasy VII Remake actually managed to come out. Color me surprised that at this point the world hasn't ended in complete nuclear annihilation, but hey, we still got most of 2020 left to bring the worst. Anyway, video games.
35mm.
You ever just stumble across some random and completely unknown piece of media that you look online for any information about and find very little? This happens occasionally to me because of the fact I like small horror developers and small independent horror movies to a point now where I've just gotten used to it, and where it's just been, I look up something online and the only video I find about it is an untranslated Russian or from somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing, and it's in 360p. It's all just pretty bad, looking up any information about these bad boys. Well, 35mm is one of those games, one of those totally unknown and largely unmentioned Slavic games that exist in a dreary post-humanity world filled with philosophy and bad gameplay. The game itself is made by Noskov Sergey, or however the hell that's said. I don't actually speak Slav. Anyway, whether or not this game is made by one guy or not is conflicted, and I saw him name two completely different things in two different places, so fuck it. I just don't know, and I don't know if it was made by one dude or two or what, but I just know it's Russians. At least one. There's at least one confirmed. That's all I got. The best way to describe this game is a cross between something like Stalker or Metro mixed with the commonly tossed around trash term that is walking simulator. This game is less focused on silly trivial things like gunplay or being playable like its other contemporaries, but to me at least that just ups the charm big time, because instead it focuses on telling a story on the fun topic that is philosophy. I don't know, I kind of dig it. Then again, I'm always down to look for games or media that have a real grasp of their tone and message, even if they lack all the bells and whistles of silly things like gameplay or good graphics or good plot developments.
Gameplay.
Let's just get this out of the way, because gameplay in this video game is pretty much non-existent. While most people might just assume that this is normal because it's a walking simulator, I've played my fair share, and what many lack in depth gameplay-wise, they tend to make up for with objects you can interact with or something to break the monotony between events. You can interact with the world in some way generally, or there's tapes to listen to, or something like that to kind of split things up. 35mm decides against doing this at any point, only breaking up the long sections of walking around without dialogue by giving a puzzle here and there where you have to hunt down an object to progress. The gameplay of this game is incredibly simple, because I don't really think the developer knew how to craft the basic gameplay systems that one might expect, but then again, this is their second full attempt at making a game, so I take it with a grain of salt, and I can't judge too harsh. Surprisingly enough, this game also features gunplay for some reason, and it feels... it just feels awful to actually play. I think it's admirable for the developer with very little experience to actually make an attempt, but it just doesn't work. Besides that, another pillar of this game is just walking around abandoned buildings and abandoned forest roads and just kind of looking at the neat visuals despite obvious graphical limitations and asset reuse that is more than likely, seeing as this bad boy is made on Unity. While you explore these locations and look around them, which you spend most of the game doing, your partner will occasionally throw a task at you to complete, like getting water from a nearby well or finding out how to turn the power back on in an abandoned building. These tasks, as I said before, break up periods of silence and walking around, as well as give you an objective to progress through certain areas. However, these puzzles, or objectives, that you do get are frequently vague as hell with no real mark or icon to direct you to the object you're looking for. It's like trying to find a bucket in the middle of a junk pile in the dark while blindfolded. There were multiple moments where I just did not know how to proceed, and despite the game trying to tell me what to look for, the task of actually finding it felt more like a personal hell than anything fun. Long story short, the gameplay lacks anything in depth, anything fun, or anything unique. And normally I would say whatever, that's no biggie, but in this case there's not much else to actually make up for it, or anything like that. Unlike something like Blair Witch or Soma with minimal gameplay but a world and story that somewhat make up for it, this just feels like someone's first attempt at a game, which it probably is. Because of that, I find it hard to get too upset, but like the direction and goals of this game they're terrible. So much so that I just frequently got upset at how unclear all the objectives always were and got lost in areas so many times. This game is about a 2-hour game that is stretched out to maybe 4 because of these really, really puzzling sections that just don't offer any hints to help you besides just saying, oh, go find the bucket, go find the battery or whatever. But, you know, what does that mean when the world has so much junk, so much clutter all around it? It just all looks like junk and clutter. It's hard to tell what's an actual object that can be picked up. There's no distinguishing between objects that can't be picked up and objects that can, so you just run around hitting the pickup button over and over again and all the objects, and eventually you find the object, but it just takes so long. It takes why is it like this? I don't understand why it's like this. Why is it like this?
Atmosphere.
The sound of crisp, compressed to hell and back free sound effects from soundeffects.com. How lovely. The sound design in this game is unsurprisingly lacking, considering it was something made incredibly on the cheap without the ability to really do sound work that, say, a professional studio might be able to do. Because of that, I definitely give it an excuse for sounding so horribly dated and compressed, as most of its library seems to come from free sound effect libraries, or at the very least ones that aren't very pricey. That's not even to say it's lazy as so much as probably a restriction of budget and outside factors, but god, it tries its best despite itself. The environments itself in this game are actually somewhat decent looking occasionally. It's far from being pretty, but you can see some ideas of cool layouts and pretty broken down buildings occasionally, though seeing as the game is in Unity, it's totally possible most of these are generic assets, but hey, at least they're well used. I mean, I get it. Making assets is very hard and not something everybody can do, especially since this seems to be one of the only projects this person has made up to this date. I doubt it was even meant to be a large-scale project that was sold to international markets from the get-go. I will say, despite limitations, this game tries its best with sound and visual design to make things stand out or seem to mesh together, and while there's flaws in it, it's not like it deserves great praise or anything, but I can see the creator tried his best, and given the situation he was in, I'm not sure I could do much better myself in that situation. Despite all this, there's still some pretty decent times where you can tell there was some work put into this. A lot of the underground sections are very nice looking, and they have some good-ass moody vibes that I do wish more of the game really held. You know, the top world, it does have some Metro vibes, but the people that you interact with and stuff like that, they don't really do anything, and it's just weird and off-putting, and I don't know, it just doesn't connect with me as much. But there's definitely work put in here. You know, you can see some clear wishes to do more than, you know, might have been actually possible for just one person to do. But currently this game kind of feels like it was definitely a college project or something. But anyway, yeah, so the visuals, you know, I wouldn't say there's anything that stands out, but it's, you know, I've seen worse. The story of 35mm is a little loose and up for interpretation as far as I can tell, at least beyond the very basic structure and characters. It's simple, but at the same time also veers off pretty wildly in the end and sets up way bigger ideas than the single developer would most likely ever be able to pull off by himself. The story follows two wandering survivors that roam a post-apocalyptic Russian world, mostly sticking to country roads and small uninhabited towns trying to make their way way to somewhere that we don't quite know yet. From the start, there's really barely any information available to us. We don't really even learn the name of our main character or his goals for about 20 or 30 minutes into the game, because this game has an incredibly slow burn. Like, there's sometimes minutes without any speaking in between walking from location to location, and I mean, like, there is just 20 minutes sometimes where nothing happens and nobody is talking, or there's just nothing. There's just nothing and you just walk in a straight line. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Needless to say, if you aren't somebody who is down for some slow-ass pointless meandering as two dudes talk about philosophy, this probably isn't going to be the game for you. There's very little direct answers as to what actually happens during the story beyond a few lines here or there, general interpretation. This isn't one of those games where it's super art housey and the interpretation is great. It's just unclear because of language barriers or just because of, not great direction on the creator's part. Thing is, I also remembered this game having some sort of interesting story or focus or charm that would draw me in. That's why I decided to play it for this channel, but going back, I found it was just nothing like I remembered it at all. It's clearly an ambitious title from one developer, and you get the feeling that he wanted to create some sort of story or commentary, but in the media of video games, this is just so incredibly slow and boring that me, a guy who loves slow and boring games, would have struggled to finish this if it wasn't 3 hours long. The extent of the plot is that you play as a man who woke up in a hospital after a car crash and found one other surviving person in the building when you do. Both of you are some of the only survivors of some type of illness that has ravaged the land, and you band together to venture out to the big city where our main character's family is supposedly located. You go from scene to scene investigating houses with your friend you never quite learn the name of, and talk about philosophy and how the rich are bad, as well as going on wacky adventures like getting kidnapped and escaping from bandits time and time again as you move from town to town. There's also some kind of Metro-like alignment system which determines the ending you get, but they matter very little. I don't know, it seems like a really odd choice to include in this game given everything else. Anyway, on this Russian bizarre adventure, you encounter dogs, bandits, old men offering you food, children asking you for help with puzzles, and the weirdest of all, a fight with statues out of nowhere when dreaming that never comes up again. A lot of it feels less like a cohesive idea and more like a shattered, fractured mind of somebody who wants to tell a story but has very little experience or ability to actually do it. The ending shows this perfectly well with spoiler warning. So, the ending. You spend all this time trying to get to this town to see your family again, talking with your friend of the occasional philosophies and how much he hates the rich, and eventually you finally make it home, and you're searching to get into your apartment. Of course you don't know that this is the final area of the game or anything at this point. No, it's really unclear, and you really don't even know what you're looking for until you find your apartment door, and then your character says, "Oh, I should go find the key to unlock this door," or something along those lines. So, you spend the next 40 minutes or so trying to find that, and in order to find that, you need to go collect some batteries and stuff, and while wandering around the city, you can also just get, called into an alley, and if you go into that alley, you just get stabbed to death in the gut. Yeah, it's one of the weird things that happens, and I'm not entirely, 100% sure of this, but I think the metro system that they have there for, morals has this person appear, maybe not, I don't know, but if you follow her, she brings you into this back alley, and yeah, you just get stabbed, and then you have to take care of this fetch quest regardless. So, for me, I was roaming around the city stabbed to death for about 40 minutes trying to find these batteries, because there's tons of batteries on the ground, but they're not the right batteries because they're just slightly a different color. So you have to find the right batteries, and to do that you have to roam around a bunch of buildings and through floors of buildings and see all this stuff. And I mean, there's cool atmosphere and stuff, but why is this here? Anyway, so you do all this stuff, all alone, because earlier in the game your friend, he helped fight off some of the bandits and he stayed behind. But you are alone in this time, and you're doing all these fetch quests, doing all these battery collecting things, and finally you get a lockpick to break into your apartment. So you go back to your apartment and you finally break in, and you take a look around and you realize, yeah, it's the same room you saw in an earlier cutscene in the game, and you enter in your daughter's room, a character who has never been mentioned. I don't think the daughter was mentioned once, actually. But anyway, you enter inside the room and you sit down on her little desk and you pull out a family album to look at while you just kind of bleed out to death, and then it cuts to the friend from earlier, you know, in a sewer, escaping, and he finds a picture of you and your children and your family all together by a car, and then there's a flashback to him being a drunk driver, and he hit that same car, and that's why he was in the hospital with you. Now, that's a really dumb twist. It comes out of nowhere. It's not mentioned, you know, that character never has any, you know, collection to that. He never mentions anything like that or feeling remorse or any, like, none of this is built up to it all. It just kind of happens, and then the game just ends and your character dies. And then I got a nice achievement for it. I got a nice achievement for dying. But, you know, I didn't feel like it was worth it. And so the game just kind of ends after this, you know, all that journey just to get stabbed to death and, you know, die. I don't even know what to say to this. Like, what do you do? I don't even, the main character doesn't even get that information that his children were killed in that crash or anything like that. It's so hard to do anything. He just looks at the picture and he feels sad. And then you're just supposed to imply that, like, he knew or something. I don't know. I don't know. Please help me. Welcome back, non-spoiler crew. I guess for some reason you wanted to protect yourselves from spoilers to a game you will absolutely never play, but hey, that's cool. Who am I to judge? With that out of the way though, I'll simply say this: the story is lacking, and it really feels either unfinished or underdeveloped or just mixed, but I don't know. I'm so tired and I just want to get this video done at this point. I thought I would revisit this game and pull out a gem when I went dumpster diving. I really remembered liking this game a lot more, and like, come on, my standards are so much lower than the average person. I made a video praising the Blair Witch game, for Pete's sake. I really try to be positive and try to find good things to say, but right now I'm just struggling to find anything, and normally when I make these videos there's at least something to latch onto here. Playing this just made me feel empty, and honestly, like, I can tell it's probably a student game or something like that, but I'm less upset at the developer and more at myself for going, hey dumbass, try this game again, it was good, remember? And making myself do a whole video about it. I mean, hell, I struggled to put down words to paper here and actually write a script. It was, I don't know. It was just a vacuum on my soul, and I need to finish it ASAP or I might just die never getting another video made. I apologize if I come off as harsh or mean. I am just so incredibly ready to move on to the next thing, and I think this has reminded me that not everything is always going to be how I remember it, and sometimes it's gonna be a real grind getting through some of my backlog in some of these games. I just hope in the future, when I run into something like this, it inspires me a bit more, you know? Normally with games, there's always something I see and go, hey, wow, you know, if they can make that, I can totally get on making videos, and on a crumbling platform, I can make it, I can get by. Anyway, onwards and upwards, right? On to the next big thing, which just happens to be a video this has kind of inspired me to write in reference to all this. No idea when you can expect it, but hey, I'm trying my best, and I hope everybody out there is pulling together and surviving. Stay safe, gamers, and I'll see you next time on The Gamer Grind. Oh, that's that cool.